There's a particular kind of silence that only exists in the Pacific Northwest rainforest. It's not the silence of absence, it's the silence of waiting. The trees hold their breath, the moss swallows sound, and somewhere in that green cathedral of cedar and fir, something that shouldn't exist learns your voice. Welcome back to Unquiet Corners. I'm Alex Vane. Tonight's story comes from a man named David, a former trail maintenance officer for Olympic National Park. I met him in a coffee shop near the edge of the Hoh Rainforest, where the rain never quite stops and the fog never fully lifts. He wrapped both hands around his mug like he was warming them over a fire that had gone out years ago. And after a long silence, he told me what happened on his last night in those woods. This is his account. I'm just the one who listened. You might think the rainforests of the Pacific Northwest are nothing but beauty, postcard views, tourist brochures with misty trees and golden sunlight breaking through the canopy. But ask any trekker, any hiker who spent a night alone out there, and they'll tell you something else. Behind those towering pines and firs, there are things that don't fit inside a photograph. Things that don't make sense until they're scratching at your door. David was 38 when it happened, 5 years ago, mid-October, just before the winter season shut down the remote trails. He was a trail maintenance officer for Olympic National Park. His job was to keep the backcountry routes clear, check the signposts, make sure the wilderness stayed accessible for the few souls brave enough to wander deep into it. On this particular assignment, he was sent to one of the most isolated routes inside the Hoh Rainforest, a place so remote that cell service doesn't exist. In an emergency, the only lifeline was a satellite radio strapped to his pack, and the only company he had was his Labrador, Barney. That afternoon, David worked through the dense undergrowth, clearing fallen branches and checking trail markers. The forest around him was thick with fog and towering trees. Sunlight barely touched the forest floor. By 4 o'clock, the light had already begun to fail, swallowed by the canopy and the mist that never truly left this part of the park. He decided he wouldn't make it back to the main station before dark, so he headed for a small Park Service cabin hidden deeper in the woods, a wooden shelter used by rangers on overnight trips. It wasn't much, a fireplace, a cot, a heavy oak door, but it was shelter. David got the fire going. Barney curled up near the hearth, content and warm. And for a while, everything felt ordinary. The kind of ordinary that makes you forget you're miles from anyone else. But then David noticed something. The forest had gone quiet. Not the normal quiet of nightfall, but a wrong quiet. A silence so complete, it felt deliberate. No insects, no owls, no rustle of leaves in the wind. Even the wind itself seemed to have stopped. The only sound in the world was the occasional snap of burning wood in the fireplace. And that's when Barney stood up. The Labrador had been sound asleep, but now he was on his feet, hackles raised along his spine, every muscle taut. He was staring at the cabin door. And he was growling, a low warning sound David had never heard from him before. David's first thought was a bear or a mountain lion. It wouldn't be unusual for an animal to wander close to the cabin, drawn by the warmth or the smell of food. He reached for his 12-gauge shotgun and moved toward the door, careful and slow. He peered through the small glass window set into the heavy wood. Nothing but fog. Thick, impenetrable fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. And then, knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. Not frantic, not aggressive, polite. The kind of knock you'd give a neighbor's door. But out here, in the middle of the whole rainforest, miles from the nearest human being, it was the most terrifying sound David had ever heard. He called out, his voice steady despite the ice running through his veins. "Who's there?" I'm a park ranger." No answer. Barney had stopped growling. Now he was backing away from the door, pressing himself against David's legs, trying to hide. A brave hunting dog who had never flinched at anything. And he was trembling. David held the shotgun tighter. He waited. And then, from the other side of the door, a voice spoke. But it wasn't the voice of a stranger. "Who's there? I'm a park ranger. Open the door." David's blood turned to ice. It was his own voice. His exact tone. His exact inflection. The same words he had just spoken, mimicked perfectly from the other side of that oak door. He shouted back, his voice cracking now. "Whoever you are, get away! I have a gun!" The human voice stopped, but what replaced it was worse. A sound like claws, long, sharp, hungry, raking down the surface of the door, wood splintering, the frame shuddering with each pass. David aimed the shotgun at the door, his finger on the trigger, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Barney had crawled under the cot. He was making sounds David had never heard a dog make, a high-pitched, terrified whine mixed with something almost like a sob. The temperature inside the cabin plummeted. David could see his own breath misting in front of his face. The fire was burning, but it gave no warmth. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, as if whatever was out there was trying to dig through the door. And beneath the scratching, a new sound. A hiss. Low and wet, like air escaping from something that shouldn't be breathing. David doesn't know how long he stood there, frozen, waiting for the door to give way. Minutes, maybe hours. The scratching and the hissing seemed to fill the entire world. There was nothing else. No forest, no fire, no dog. Just the door, and whatever was on the other side. And then, from somewhere far in the distance, a sound cut through the night. A wolf howled. Another joined it. Then another. The howls grew closer, a pack gathering somewhere in the fog. David couldn't tell if they were hunting or if they were running from something. But whatever was on the other side of the door, it stopped. The scratching ceased. The hissing fell silent. David heard a quick, scrabbling sound, like something retreating in a hurry. And then, nothing. The normal sounds of the forest returned. Wind through the trees, an owl calling in the distance. The fire in the hearth suddenly felt warm again. David didn't sleep that night. He sat against the wall, shotgun across his knees, Barney pressed against his side, until the pale light of dawn filtered through the cabin's single window. When the sun finally rose, he found the courage to open the door. What he saw stopped him cold. The heavy oak door, solid wood, an inch and a half thick, had 4 deep gouges carved into its surface. Not deep enough to go all the way through, but deep enough to leave permanent scars in the grain. Fresh splinters littered the ground. At the base of the door, there were tracks in the mud, but they were strange, indistinct, like something had pressed into the earth but hadn't left a clear shape, as if the thing that made them didn't quite belong to this world. And there, lying directly in front of the door, placed there, was a fresh pine branch. David didn't touch it. He grabbed his pack, called Barney, and walked out of that forest. He didn't stop until he reached his truck. Within a week, he quit the Park Service. 5 years later, he still can't explain what happened that night. He doesn't try to. He just lives with the memory. And every time he hears a knock at his door, polite, measured, 3 slow raps, his heart stops for just a second. Stories like these, they don't leave you. They settle into the spaces between your ribs, beneath your skin, in the quiet moments when you're alone at night and the house creaks around you. The Hoh Rainforest is still there. The cabin is still standing. The door still has those 4 marks in it. And somewhere in that deep, fog-choked green, something is still waiting. Maybe it only knocks at night. Maybe it only comes when you're alone. But here's the question I can't stop asking myself, and now I'm asking you. When you hear 3 knocks at your door, and you know no one is there, will you answer? This has been Unquiet Corners. I'm Alex Vane. Lock your doors. Good night.